True to its name, the center has always tried to go to the edges of our discipline and to its core, to go to the one in a way to find the other. Certainly, efficiency is one of the ideas at architecture's core, as well as at the core of engineering. It's a place we thought that architects and engineers can do a kind of mind meld. The question is how to get to that place, and the answer clearly is theater, or, debate. A format that quickly draws out the best arguments by mock pugnaciously going for the heart. And we'll introduce this afternoon's moderators, the ever young and dapper duo, Richard Cleary and Matt Ficus.
We invite the audience to challenge the debaters and challenge the moderators with your thoughts on this subject. Unlike a normal academic talk, you may feel free to let your voices be heard. This is a particular kind of debate that is much more interactive than what we're normally used to. Most of us in this room, and those of you listening via the webcast, have grown up conditioned by the notions of progress and efficiency. The notion of progress embraces the belief that tomorrow will be a better day, materially in our ability to survive in the world, and spiritually in the sense of Martin Luther King Jr.'s long arc bending towards justice. The notion of efficiency is a relational value pertaining to the comparison of production with cost. We aspire to high efficiency. That's progress. We are the progeny, accepting or defiant, of the efficiency movement that a century ago cut across most sectors of social activity in the United States and Europe. Business, science and technology, politics, and the arts all celebrated rationality and adopted programs intended to increase efficiency. Interest in efficiency has varied over the years I've taught in the School of Architecture, and is now high among students, inspired, I believe, by the strong ethos within our school of doing the right thing and honoring the architect's obligation to the social good. Thus, it seems timely to bring the matter of efficiency to the fore and test it in the crucible of debate on the proposition, be it resolved. Efficiency is the prime mover of great design. As this is a test, we urge the debaters and you in the audience to push the resolutions to the limits, as Michael suggested, and to avoid, as much as possible, the safe middle ground where we typically bury complex propositions.
Therefore, we hope that this debate not only challenges preconceived assumptions about the relative value of efficiency in design, but also challenges preconceptions about the perspectives upon the role of architect and engineer. Stereotypical tropes may suggest that the architect is more interested in experience or only interested in efficiency in respect to diagrammatic or formal ideals, while the engineer is more interested in efficiency in terms of building performance or feasibility. Rather than further polarizing the disciplines of architecture and engineering and pitting them against one another, the panels are specifically structured such that one architect and one engineer are paired together to debate against one architect and one engineer on the opposite side of the topic. Regarding the format in a broad sense, there will be 3 rounds flanked by an audience vote at the beginning before the 3 rounds, and also a vote after all 3 rounds. The winner of the debate will be determined by which team moved the dial most in terms of the audience stance on the topic. Among the 3 rounds, the first and last are more structured, while the second round is more interactive. The third round consists of 5-minute closing statements by each of the speakers, followed by the audience vote, the tallying of the vote, and the declaration of the winner to conclude the event.
Okay, so at this time, we are going to ask everyone to cast their first vote. So deciding, this will determine a bit of the preconceptions coming in, or whether you are for or against efficiency or neutral as the prime mover in great design. With that, we're going to kick off the first of 3 rounds.
Speaking for the resolution, we have Fiona Cousins and Tim Love. Fiona Cousins is a principal with ARUP's New York office. She is a professional engineer with a background in mechanical engineering and much experience in HVAC design. At ARUP New York, she leads the sustainability team and is one of the leaders of the mechanical engineering team.
That efficiency is the prime mover of great design. Great design is what happens when your ideas and purposes butt heads with the constraints of the real world. These can be, as Eames says, constraints of price, size, strength, balance, surface, time, and so forth. So I suggest that these constraints are also drivers of efficiency. Money, time, materials, space, energy, and water are all limited resources when it comes to building, and the best design will emphasize economy of means. Of course, we can always economize to doing nothing, so the definition that I will use for efficiency is an economy of means in any of the areas where we care about how much of something we use, in the service of creating a delightful experience for the user. The routes that generate these efficiencies are in some cases architecturally driven, in some cases engineering driven, and in most cases fall into some area of overlap. This sums up for me how efficiency is clearly the driver of great design. A project starts with goals, is explored through ideas and hypotheses, and is then shaped and improved through engaging with the constraints of time, money, space, materials, energy, and water. It is the process of engaging with the constraints, of using the efficiency of resources as the litmus test for making decisions as to how user outcomes are achieved that moves the thing forward, that allows what Bjarke Ingels described as the evolution of the design. And at each stage of that evolution, there has to be a decision about which path to pursue, which manifestation represents the most effective and efficient solution. My learned colleagues will argue that great design is all about the idea that creates user delight, but that's not enough. The idea must be shaped and driven, and efficiency is the driver, the prime mover of great design.
Those who are against the resolution, I'd first like to introduce Nat Oppenheimer, who's a principal and executive vice president of Silman, in its more wordy form, Robert Silman Associates Structural Engineers. Tim, besides his work with Silman, teaches at Princeton University and is involved often with the Integrated Studio, which is quite famous there.
Great efficiency could push and pull, but not necessarily drive. And the most obvious example for me as a structural engineer starts with your basic bending moment diagram and shear diagram, for those of you in the audience who have taken that class at this point. You get a beam that can be idealized to its best shape in the middle due to moment and bending, and at the ends due to shear, and you can end up with a nice, efficient structural beam that we all know is the best way to build a building. Of course, technology has told us otherwise, and there is not a single steel beam in the world, I would assume, other than some very unique projects driven by a main designer and not efficiency, who come up with beams that look like the previous slide. I think that the definition of efficiency is often one that can be pushed and pulled throughout design, and that what you find in the world of architecture and the world of buildings is multiple stakeholders in this argument. And I would argue that the idea of efficiency is in the eye of the beholder very often.
The other speaker in the for efficiency category is Tim Love. Tim is an associate professor and director of graduate programs at Northeastern University. He's also the principal at UTO Architecture and Planning, which is a dynamic firm which explores both theoretical work as well as practical built projects. And he's also the president of the Boston Society of Architects.
I wanted to make a point about different kinds of efficiency and the way they actually impact effect too. This is an example of, this is the paratrooper training site at Fort Bragg in Alabama, and it's a great example of efficiency at work that also produces effective surprise. The genius of this is that the barracks for the paratroopers are actually located in the structure of the towers, which means that when they're practicing, they don't land on their own houses. And the genius of it is that at some point in the design process, there must have been an aha moment when they were trying to figure out where to put the barracks and where to put the towers to do the drops, that the structure itself was big enough to fit a dormitory or a barrack inside. That is a very efficient design, but it's also a solution that also has a poetic effect because the effect of surprise. It's also proof that the best designs are retroactively inevitable. Designs that we can't think of ahead of time, but once we see them, we can't imagine any other solution. That's my definition of efficiency. I would say that a lot of, I think every judgment that we make as a designer has to do with some quality of efficiency.
Also on the Against Efficiency team is Lesley Van Duzer. She's the director of the School of Architecture and Landscape Architecture at the University of British Columbia, and she has previously taught widely across Europe and North America. She's published several award-winning books, some about Los and about Mies, which become quite operative in today's setting.
The debatable proclamation that's posed to us today suggests that the greatness of a design can be measured by the ratio of expenditure in minutes, materials, money, to productivity. If we take this proposition seriously, we're looking at an attempt, I think, to redefine great design as that which is efficient. But with that comes a real dilemma. How could we possibly include Mies van Duser's German pavilion in this definition of great design? With its shamefully short shelf life, redundant composition of columns and walls, and perfectly functional steel columns draped in chrome that collects fingerprints, surely efficiency was not this design's prime mover. I must still strenuously object to the statement as presented, because efficiency has no inherent value. Its value depends entirely on context and motivation. We know that striving for efficiency often leads to efforts to make things bigger, to gain scales of efficiency, smaller, to gain spatial efficiencies, faster, time efficiencies, newer energy efficiencies, fewer, longer, shorter, and cheaper to get cost efficiencies. We know the results of increased efficiency can be both positive and negative, even simultaneously, depending on one's perspective and one's ambition.
With that, that concludes the first round. Thanks to Fiona, Tim, Nat, and Lesley for making your initial statements. The second round will now begin. For the second round, we will have a 15-minute moderated discussion just among the panelists themselves. We will follow this up with a question and answer period that's open to the audience. The floor is open for discussion for each of you to respond to each other's initial statements.
The Harvard Art Museum, a spectacular building in my opinion. I worked with Fiona's firm on that, with Renzo Piano's office. I know that halfway through design development, Renzo chose to change the entire lobby layout because he had an idea that had nothing to do with efficiency. It had a flow. It was efficiency of flow of visitors through the building. But it completely reworked all of the efficiencies we had spent 8 months working out. Nigel had fun with that one. On the Whitney, there was a large gallery space that got a lot larger halfway through design development. I think Renzo tends to like that moment in time to make sure all of his ideas are there. It is anything but efficient. It costs a significant amount of money to cantilever out to carry the entire mass of the Whitney over this open gallery and to extend it further. That was driven by basically a zoning decision, as I remember, that somebody said we can get this extra space and here's where we should put it. I think it's a celebrated space. It's one that makes the building in many ways, but it was not driven by me or the mechanical team or anyone else saying, hey, if you do this, you know, we're just going to be that much more efficient. So again, maybe I'm punting and maybe I'm supporting your suggestion, but I really believe that's the business I support, that this is really a truly integrated discussion and that it drives many great designs within a global framework that's set by an author.
I think that one of the things that you point out there is that what you pushed or what got pushed in the middle of that exercise was actually the efficiency of putting a building within a zoning envelope. It wasn't an efficiency that was added. It was horribly inefficient for the entire design team, and thank goodness I wasn't on that one. But there are issues where it's what, if you don't set the goals right, you can't understand what it is that you're trying to be efficient with. And if you don't understand what it is you're trying to be efficient with, you make bad judgments. And the efficiency of some of the things that you say, well, that's more efficient, are not efficiencies that support your goals. And if the efficiencies don't support your goals, you'll make bad decisions and the design won't be good.
I just wanted to help the conversation a little bit from dictionary.com.
Dictionary.com says
efficiency is the ability to accomplish a job with minimum expenditure of time and effort. My question is, if you have to encrust the words with like Ruby and all these other wonderful things in order to make it viable, then is it in fact the driver, or is it something that has to be defined in this lofty way in order to become the driver?
so. It has to do with, if you have to have a lot of words to explain what you mean, what you've got.
Right.
So the dictionary.com is probably right for you going and buying a cup of coffee or cleaning your house, but I'm not sure that they're right from the point of view of building design. I think that there are more constraints than time and effort. There are things like space, there are things like materials, adjacencies, energy, water. There are things that are very much in the conversation about efficiency when you start talking about building design that are not in the dictionary.com definition. And I agree, we have taken the broadest possible definition of efficiency in order to support the motion. That's what the debate is all about. But really, I think that it is about the combination of things. It's not just about time and effort. It's really about all of these other things that we care about how much of them we use. We care about how much material we use. We care about how much money we spend. We care about how much water and energy we use in a building, both during and after. And you can't say, well, efficiency for buildings only is about how quickly you can put it up and how cheap it is. I mean, it's not really enough, and it's certainly not enough for great design.
But I think that goes back to the point I was making, and in general, that exactly what you're saying, Fiona, that there are so many drivers, and I think it's a very valid point. Again, that there are a number of times in buildings where the most efficient moves in certain areas might cause inefficiencies in others, and somebody has to make a judgment call. And again, so to me, it often is to turn it around a little bit, a floor and ceiling argument, not physically but metaphorically, that there's a higher ceiling to an authorship of a project and this integration than there is a floor to pure efficiency, as brought up by one of the audience members. And not even going that far, but that to the point you're making, Fiona, that you can absolutely achieve great design with efficiency as a driver. But it goes back to that idea of the modifier prime that I think hooks me.
The question is in some ways similar to some of the other questions that have been asked, but is it not the larger goal of both the fields of architecture and engineering to do the most good with the least means? Saying that what makes design proper design is going beyond just aesthetics and actually transcending to perform.
So I would just like to say that I don't think great architecture is always about optimizing efficiency or optimizing, and in fact I believe that at the risk of being shot, that almost all great architecture has quite intentionally a degree of waste in it. And whether you want to talk about wasted space, a volume that's bigger than it needs to be, a material that's serves as ornament that doesn't need to be, but it's a degree of waste, and I actually think that that's a very important quality in great architecture.
And now for the format of the third round once again, which is the shortest round. Each debater will have a moment to make a final statement.
So, having heard what we have heard and said what we have said, the way that I would like to sum this up is some of the things I have already said. I think that when you are working within design, if you are trying to achieve great design, and I hope that we all are all of the time, You have to start with an idea of what it is that you're aiming for. You have to have a set of goals. And you have to work through that set of goals by throwing ideas at them, lots and lots and lots of ideas at them. And then you have to evaluate those ideas against those goals. And I think that the way to do that is to apply the ideas of efficiency, the idea of meeting the most goals with the least means for the whole of the goal set that you're looking at. And it's this movement from goals to ideas to efficiency that actually drives the design forward, that continuous iteration with evaluating each of your iterations with the efficiency metrics that actually gets you to move forward, that makes you understand where the improvements can come. So that's my closing statement.
In closing, I do feel very strongly that efficiency plays an important role in design. But again, I am very firmly against, even more so after this debate, the idea that it's the prime driver. I go back to that idea of prime, that it is what sets all of the goals for the project and so on. I think that there is a real need for authorship that goes beyond, that is able to make judgment calls, that is able to make decisions, that is able to pick between efficiencies that drive that project. And I think ignoring that or suggesting that whatever comes out in the end as the efficiency drivers, that's what made the project, whereas the things you ignored, the waste, were somehow discounted, is not a fair representation of what great design is.
I think that the perception persists that that efficiency means that the author steps away and rule sets take over. And I want to be clear to the audience that that efficiency is the prime tool that the designer as author uses to make a whole set of decisions. And I don't think there is any waste in great architecture. Great architecture is a complex web of spatial, technological, and linguistic syntactical decisions. If you're willing to accept the fact that efficiency is related to judgment and rigor, that I don't know how what else actually drives great design.
I just want to reiterate that efficiency is neither good or bad, and it is at times even evil. As you pointed out, one can be very efficient and do great harm. Efficiency just cannot be the prime motivator because it does not have any inherent value. Repeating what I've said before. So I'm going to take this topic of judgment keeps coming up, and ethics keeps coming up. And if you slather over your argument about efficiency being the prime mover, well, only if it's ethical, then I really do think we need to change the statement to say, I think we need to vote against your statement, this statement, vote against you. And, and being on the con side, I can just tear down the existing statement, and I would like to change that to be ethics, which keeps coming up, right? You have to have good judgment, you have to be ethical. Ethics actually is the prime mover of good design.
Vote 1 for the resolution, 38%. Against, 44.6%. Undecided, 17.4%. All right, let's see what's happened the second time around.
Vote 2 for is 13.5%. Undecided 10.1%, and against 76.4%.
44 people. The needle has been swayed by the vote of the people, and we must declare the against group team the winners of this debate.
All right.